The termination letter was already signed when I walked into the room. This is Revenge Room. If this is the first time you are seeing our video, kindly like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. No warning email. No review meeting. No prior conversation. Just a short calendar invite at 7:48 in the morning from HR Director Paula Osei. Conference Room C. No agenda. When I sat down, she slid a single sheet across the table without making eye contact. At the top, in bold letters, position terminated, effective immediately. My name, my job title, Lead Systems Architect, NovaBridge Technologies, and at the bottom, one signature, CEO Harlan Voss. I looked up at Paula. Did Mr. Voss review this himself? She shifted slightly. He trusts the recommendation from your department head. My department head, Marcus Boyle, and the recommendation was based on what exactly? Performance concerns, she said. I almost laughed. In 4 years at NovaBridge, I had never received a single negative review. My last quarterly rating had been exceptional, signed by Marcus himself. But I said nothing more, because sitting in that cold little office, with the paper between us, something settled into place with absolute clarity. This was not a misunderstanding. I had been deliberately set up, and Marcus Boyle had been planning it longer than I had realized. Security walked me out like I had done something dangerous. The policy required an escort to the elevator for immediate terminations. But the guard they sent, a large man named Deo, walked 3 visible steps behind me across the entire open office floor. Every person at every desk could see exactly what was happening. I kept my head up. I walked steadily. I did not look at anyone, but I saw them. Colleagues I had worked with for years glanced up and quickly looked back down. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning. I was almost at the elevator when I passed the glass-walled conference room near the end of the hall. Marcus was inside. He was standing with his arms crossed, speaking to VP of Operations Tund Adeyemi. As I passed, he turned his head. Our eyes met for exactly 1 second. He smiled, not broadly, a small, quiet smile, the kind worn by someone whose plan has come together exactly as intended. The elevator doors closed. I stared at my reflection in the brushed metal and watched the floor numbers drop. The lobby doors opened. The afternoon heat hit me. Then my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. The message was from Zara Mensah, Operations Director at Pinnacle Freight Solutions, the company at the center of the largest deal NovaBridge had been chasing all year. Quick check. Are you joining tomorrow's final signing? Room booked for 9. I read it twice, then a third time. Zara had no idea I had just been walked out of the building. As far as she knew, I was still the lead systems architect managing the entire technical side of the Pinnacle integration, the person she had spoken to every week for 3 months, who had answered every hard question and earned her trust one honest conversation at a time. Tomorrow morning, NovaBridge was set to sign a contract with Pinnacle Freight worth $47 million. I stood in the parking lot and felt the full weight of it land. They had fired me the day before the biggest deal in the company's recent history was set to close. Not because of performance concerns. Marcus wanted to be standing at that signing table. He wanted his name attached to $47 million. He needed me gone first. I typed, "Let me confirm in the morning." Then I stood very still and started thinking 3 months earlier, I had been handed a project nobody wanted. The Pinnacle Freight integration had been described internally as a complex modernization initiative. What that actually meant was that the previous team had spent 8 months trying to connect NovaBridge's logistics software to Pinnacle's freight platform and failed completely. Data corrupted mid-transfer. Schedules disappeared. Alerts fired randomly through the night. Pinnacle's leadership was frustrated and close to walking away entirely. Marcus called me into his office and dropped a thick folder on his desk. "I need you to take this over," he said. "Client is losing patience. I need someone who can look at the whole picture and tell me what is actually wrong." The documentation inside was a mess. No clear version history, missing handover notes, no record of what had been tried. "What is the timeline?" I asked. "Signing in 90 days, he said. "Miss it, and we lose the client permanently." He leaned back. "Think of it as a career opportunity." I heard the words. I also heard what he left unsaid, that if it failed, my name would already be on it. I took the folder home that night. By midnight, I had found the real problem. It was worse than anyone had admitted. The system was not just broken. It had been built on a foundation that was never going to hold. The original team had tried to connect both platforms using an outdated middleware layer that NovaBridge had quietly stopped supporting 8 months earlier. The middleware was still listed as active in internal documentation, but the security certificates had expired and the update cycle was long abandoned. Every attempt to push real-time freight data through it was hitting a silent failure. Data appeared to transfer successfully, then corrupted somewhere in the middle, undetected until Pinnacle's system produced errors at the other end. The fix was not technically complicated, but it required starting over. The middleware needed to be removed entirely and replaced with a direct API bridge. That meant time and full cooperation from both technical teams. I wrote a clear report and brought it to Marcus the next morning. He skimmed it for 45 seconds. "We don't have time to rebuild," he said. "Patch what's there. Make it stable enough for the demo." I explained plainly that under real freight volumes, the kind Pinnacle processed daily, the patch would fail within weeks of going live. He looked at me with flat eyes. "Make the demo work." I left his office and sat quietly at my desk. Then I made the decision that changed everything. I started rebuilding the system, properly, on my own time. During office hours, I did what Marcus approved. I stabilized the patched version well enough for controlled demos and attended client update calls, choosing my words carefully. I never made promises I could not keep. I never confirmed the patched version was truly fit for purpose. At night, I opened my personal laptop and built the integration from scratch. A direct API bridge, designed cleanly, tested step by step, documented at every stage. I told no one, not because I was hiding something, because I did not yet know if it would be enough. And I had watched long enough to know what happened at NovaBridge when you raised problems without a solution already in hand. By the end of the 3rd week, the new architecture was working in my test environment, cleanly, consistently, no silent failures. That same week, Zara Mensah called me directly. She had my number from an early project briefing. She did not go through the account manager. She called at 7:15 on a Thursday evening and said simply, "I need to know what is actually happening with this project." I paused for one moment. Then I told her the complete truth. Zara was exactly the kind of person who could tell the difference between a presentation and a real answer. I had noticed it on group calls, the way she asked follow-up questions that pushed past the surface of whatever Marcus or the account manager had just said. The way she waited after a polished response, as if giving the room a chance to correct itself. When I told her the full truth, that the original integration was architecturally broken, that the approved patches would not hold under real traffic, and that I had been rebuilding it properly on my own time, she was silent for almost a full minute. Then, "Why hasn't your company told us this?" "Admitting it means admitting 8 months were wasted," I said. "My manager believes the patch will hold long enough to get through the signing. And you don't believe that." "I know it won't," I said, "but I have a version that will work. If you give me access to test it against your live data environment, I can have it ready before the signing date." Another pause. Then, "Send me what you have." I sent it that night. By Monday morning, she had replied with one line, "We trust you. What do you need from us?" That was the moment the entire situation shifted. For the next 6 weeks, I lived 2 separate professional lives. During the day at NovaBridge, I attended Marcus's meetings and gave progress reports on the patched version. I kept my language precise, accurate, but incomplete. I said the system was stable, which was true in the narrow sense that it did not crash during controlled demos. At night, I worked with Zara's technical team, testing the new API bridge against Pinnacle's actual freight data. The first week, we found 3 edge cases that caused slow responses under high volume. I fixed each one. The second week, we ran overnight stress tests. It held perfectly. I was careful about what I documented and where. Everything on the new build lived on my personal development account. My name was on every commit. Every log had a timestamp. I did this from instinct because I had spent 4 years watching Marcus absorb other people's contributions in casual, seamless ways, mentioning team efforts in meetings where the team had not been involved, referencing our approach for solutions he had never touched. That was not going to happen here, but I had underestimated how closely he was watching me. About 4 weeks before the signing date, he started asking very specific questions about things I had not discussed with anyone inside Nova Bridge. He started presenting my work as his own, confidently, in front of everyone. In a steering committee meeting 3 weeks before the signing, Marcus stood at the front of the room with a slide deck I had never seen. The third slide showed a system diagram, a simplified version of the direct API bridge I had designed during my evenings and weekends. He walked the committee through it as if he had built it himself. "What we've done," he said, "is move away from the middleware dependency and build a direct connection that handles real-time data transfer at scale." I sat at the table and kept my expression completely still. When the technical questions got detailed, he deflected smoothly, saying full documentation would follow before the signing. Tund shook Marcus's hand after the meeting. "This is exactly the forward thinking we needed." Marcus smiled. The team delivered. On my way back to my desk, I stopped in the bathroom, locked a cubicle door, and stood still for 30 seconds. Then I forwarded myself the full commit log from the project repository. Every entry dated, every entry under my name. I had been careful enough, but I had not anticipated one thing. And that evening, I found it buried inside a thread I had been copied on by accident 6 weeks before. It arrived through a group thread I had been added to by mistake. Marcus's assistant had included my address 6 weeks earlier and never corrected it. I had been passively copied on routine summaries ever since. Marcus had apparently never checked the recipient list because one evening a message appeared from him to Tund and Paula. Subject: Post-signing transition plan. The email was 3 professional paragraphs long. It described plans to restructure the architecture team following the successful Pinnacle signing and to transition technical leadership to a new hire. My name appeared in the second paragraph. Adiz Nwosu's role has been central to the stabilization phase, but her scope would be limited under the new structure. We recommend transitioning her out cleanly post-signing to avoid complications. Transitioning her out cleanly. I read it twice. Then, from the beginning again. This was not a performance concern. This was a schedule. They were going to let me finish the work, stand at the signing table, then remove me before the credit could attach to my name. I took a screenshot, forwarded it to my personal account. Then I went through every project folder and started collecting everything, methodically, quietly, without telling a single person what I was doing. I became very methodical over the following 2 weeks. Not out of anger. Anger was not useful to me at that point. What I felt was colder and more focused. The quiet, determined energy of someone who has seen the board clearly and knows exactly which moves remain. I pulled every email thread related to Pinnacle that contained my contributions. I saved all design documents I had authored, with original metadata showing creation dates and authorship. I compiled my full commit history from the development repository. Every update, every test result, every fix, with timestamps going back to the night I first identified the middleware failure. I saved the call logs. Every direct call from Zara. Every email reply from her technical lead addressed to me personally. I saved the steering committee meeting minutes, the ones that referenced technical decisions without naming who had actually made them. And I saved the transition plan email. Screenshotted, forwarded, printed, stored in 3 separate places. I told nobody. Not my colleagues. Not even Beezy, who was my closest friend at the company. I worked quietly and waited. And then, 2 days before the signing, the calendar invite appeared. No agenda, just a room number and Paula Osei's name. I collected my personal items from my desk before I walked in. I already knew what the invite meant. 3 days before the termination, something happened on a company-wide call that I did not fully understand until much later. Marcus had arranged a project update call as a preview of the integration. All Nova Bridge departments joined, along with Pinnacle's leadership team. He walked through the system overview confidently, presenting the test metrics from our simulation runs. Clean numbers, fast response times, zero corruption. Then tunned open the floor for questions. Pinnacle's COO, Folake Obi, asked directly, "Who led the technical rebuild? I want to know who to call when questions come up post-launch." A brief pause. Marcus began. "The architecture work was a team." Zara cut across him quietly. "Adiz Nwosu led it," she said. "Entirely. She identified the original structural failure, designed the replacement architecture, and managed all testing directly with our team. I want that clearly on record." For seconds of silence, I kept my face completely still. On the call, I saw Marcus's video towel go very quiet. When the call ended, he did not look at me for the rest of the day. 2 days after that, I was sitting in conference room C with a signed termination paper in front of me. He had moved faster than I had expected. The warning signs had been there for 2 weeks. I had simply underestimated the timing. First, my name disappeared from the updated client briefing document. Marcus's name appeared where mine had been. Then I was locked out of the shared project folder I had originally created. My personal copies were intact, but the version being prepared for the signing had been reorganized with Marcus listed as primary architect. Then the meeting invite stopped, not all of them, just the ones where signing day decisions were being made. I noted each change. I said nothing. I added each one to my records. On the morning of the termination, I arrived at 8 o'clock. Paula's invite had landed at 7:48. No agenda, just a room. I understood what it meant. I quietly collected my personal items from my desk before walking to conference room C. Just the essentials, nothing conspicuous. A small act of preparation that cost me nothing. 20 minutes later, I was in the parking lot, the sun already warm, with Zara's message on my phone and a plan taking shape. It was not yet complete, but it had a shape, and that shape showed me clearly that Marcus had made one critical mistake. He had fired me before confirming whether the system could actually function without me. Let me bring you back to Paula's office one final time. The termination paper sat between us, signed by Harlan Voss, based on a recommendation from Marcus Boyle. No independent review. No consultation with my employment record, my performance history, or any contribution log. My last 3 annual reviews were in that same HR system. All exceptional. My client feedback scores were there. My commendation from the Pinnacle account team. None of it appeared to have been read before that signature went on the page. I asked Paula one final time, very calmly, "Did Mr. Voss review my full employment record before signing this?" She straightened the paper without answering. That told me everything. Harlan Voss was a vision man. He trusted his department heads to manage personnel and only wanted decisions already made. Marcus had understood this for years and built his whole internal strategy around it. He had handed Harlan a termination paper and described it as routine restructuring. Harlan had signed it quickly, trusting the person in front of him. He had not read it, not one word. And because of that small, careless act, a signature given without thought, Marcus had just handed me every piece of leverage I needed. By 2 in the afternoon, the Nova Bridge technical team was in full crisis. I know this because Beezy called me. She was still in the building and speaking quickly, her voice low. "They're running the final integration validation right now," she said. "It's failing." I already knew why. The version they were using for tomorrow's signing was the patched middleware build, the one Marcus had approved months ago, the one I had warned him about clearly and in writing. It would not hold under real freight volumes. Zara's team had provided live test data for the validation run, real freight entries, real-time update bursts, exactly the kind of data the system would process daily from day one. The patch was buckling under it. How bad? I asked. Data corruption on about 30% of high-volume entries, Beezy said. Timeout errors every few minutes. I closed my eyes briefly, not in surprise, but in the quiet exhaustion of being exactly right about something you genuinely wished you had been wrong about. What is Marcus doing? Restarting servers, blaming the test data. A pause. Adiz, they don't have the new build. Only you have that. I thanked her and ended the call. My phone lit up again almost immediately. It was VP Tun Daddyemi. Tun's voice was controlled, but only just. Adiz, he said, I assume you are aware of the situation with today's integration validation. I've heard something, I said. We need your help tonight, just tonight, to get through the final checks. I paused. Mr. Adeyemi, I was terminated this morning. My access has been revoked. I was escorted from the building. That can be reversed temporarily. On whose authority? I asked. The termination was signed by Mr. Voss. A longer pause. I understand, and I want you to know that the circumstances of this morning may not have been fully considered by all relevant parties. That was as close to an admission as a VP at Nova Bridge would make over an informal phone call. What exactly are you asking? I said, come back tonight. Help us stabilize the system. We'll compensate your time. And my position? Silence. That is a separate conversation. I let that sit. Mr. Adeyemi, I said, I'm not able to return as a contractor to fix a system the company terminated me to avoid crediting me for building. I think you understand why. I ended the call. Then I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and started preparing for the morning. 3 more calls came in from Nova Bridge numbers over the next hour. I did not answer them. Whatever came next needed to happen in writing, on record, with the right parties present, not through informal calls from people trying to manage a crisis they had created. I was reviewing the complete technical documentation for the new API bridge, making sure every section was clear and ready for a room full of people who would read it carefully when Zara called. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge beneath it. I just spoke with your VP, she said. They've told me there was a personnel change today, and their team will handle the final integration checks overnight. And I said, the system failed validation 40 minutes ago during our pre-signing test. A pause. Is the version they're using the one you recommended? No, I said. Is there a version that works? Yes. Where is it? With me. A brief silence. Then, Adiz, I'll be direct. Pinnacle does not sign a $47 million contract tomorrow on a system that failed validation today. We will walk away. I know, I said. What would it take for you to be in that room tomorrow, not as a Nova Bridge employee? That was exactly the question I had been waiting for. I told Zara what I needed, not what would feel satisfying, what I actually needed for the signing to happen cleanly and in a way that would hold up under any scrutiny afterward. I need to come in as your independent consultant, I said, engaged directly by Pinnacle, not as NovaBridge's contractor. I need a short written engagement letter covering today and tomorrow's session, and I need to be present in the signing room with full authority to speak to the technical side of the agreement. She did not hesitate. Done. I'll have our legal team send it within the hour. One more thing, I said. Go ahead. The documentation I'm bringing tomorrow shows clearly who designed the system and when. If it comes up in the room, I will speak to it honestly. A pause. I would not have it any other way. The engagement letter arrived 43 minutes later. I read it carefully, signed it, and sent it back. Then I called Beezy. not to ask anything of her, just to tell her calmly that everything was going to be fine. Then I spent the rest of the evening preparing the complete documentation package. Build history, test logs, communication records. Clean, organized, ready to be examined by anyone at that table. I had one opportunity. I was not going to waste a single moment of it. I arrived at Pinnacle Freight's offices at 8:45 the next morning. I had dressed deliberately, not to impress, but to project steadiness. Dark blazer, clean lines. I carried my laptop bag and a printed documentation package bound in a plain folder. The receptionist checked my name and smiled. Ms. Nwosu, Ms. Mensah is expecting you. 3rd floor. The elevator opened into a wide corridor with glass walls on both sides. Through one set of panels, I could see the main boardroom. Long table, name placards, projection screen at the far end. Through another, I could see the smaller pre-meeting room where Nova Bridge's team had gathered. Marcus was there. He stood near the window in a dark suit, speaking to Tund. As I walked past the glass, he turned and saw me. His face did not fall dramatically. There was no visible collapse. But something in his eyes shifted, a small, precise recalculation, like a number being entered and coming back wrong. I did not stop walking. I did not smile or look away. I continued to the room where Zara was waiting, sat across from her, and we went through the final technical checklist together. Everything on my side was in order. Everything on his side was about to come apart completely. At 9 o'clock, both teams entered the main boardroom. Nova Bridge filed in first, Tund, Marcus, account manager Adrian Cole, and 2 from their legal team. They arranged themselves along one side. Marcus sat near the middle, placed a leather folder in front of him, and adjusted his name card. Then the Pinnacle team entered. Zara walked in beside Folake Obi, their COO. 2 legal representatives followed, then their technical lead Kofi, who gave me a brief nod when he saw me. I walked in last and sat down on the Pinnacle side of the table. The room went quiet, not dramatically, more like a held breath. A moment of collective recalibration. Several Nova Bridge team members looked at each other. Tund studied his folder. Marcus looked at me for exactly 3 seconds, then looked away without expression. Adrian leaned toward Tund and said something quietly. Tund did not respond. Folake opened the meeting efficiently. She thanked both teams, outlined the agenda, and said that before formal signing, she wanted a brief live system demonstration to confirm readiness. She turned to Kofi. He connected his laptop to the projection screen and looked at me. Every person at that table understood, without being told, that the next 10 minutes were going to determine everything. I walked Kofi through the deployment in 10 minutes. We ran the live connection from Pinnacle's test environment directly through the new API bridge. Freight entries flowed through cleanly. Real data, real-time updates, high-volume batch processing. Every response came back within threshold. 0 corruption flags, 0 timeout errors. Kofi read each metric aloud as it appeared on the screen. Folake watched with her arms folded and her jaw set. When the final sequence completed cleanly, she uncrossed her arms slowly. That, she said, is what we were promised 8 months ago. She said it to the entire room. Nobody from the Nova Bridge side responded. I slid the printed documentation across to Folake and the Pinnacle legal team. This is the full development history, I said. Architecture design, testing logs, version records, with timestamps and authorship going back to the original diagnosis of the middleware failure. Folake opened to the first page. She read the author line at the top. Then she looked up at Marcus. Who actually built this system? She asked. The question settled over the room like fine dust. Everyone went still. Marcus opened his mouth. Before a word came out, Zara stood up and moved deliberately to the head of the table. I can answer that, Zara said. She moved to the head of the table, not her seat, and everyone in the room felt the intention behind it. Over the past 3 months, she said, Pinnacle's technical team worked directly with one person to diagnose the integration failure, design a replacement architecture, and conduct all testing. That person is Adiz Nwosu. She looked at Folake, then Tund, then the Pinnacle legal team. Not at Marcus. I want to be specific because it matters for what we are about to sign. The documentation in front of you shows every design decision, every test cycle, and every communication between Adiz and our team. Every timestamp is verifiable. Every commit is traceable. She paused. It also shows that Nova Bridge's internal leadership was not involved in the actual rebuild. They were informed of the problem. They chose not to address it properly. Adiz addressed it independently on her own time because she understood what failure would mean for both companies. She sat back down. The room was silent. Then Folake turned to Harlan Voss's legal representative, a senior counsel named Bayo who had not yet spoken, and said simply, "Your CEO signed her termination yesterday. I want to understand how that decision was made." Bayo looked at Tund. Tund looked at Marcus. Marcus said nothing. Tund asked for a brief recess. The Nova Bridge team stepped into the corridor, all except Bayo, who remained with his notebook open. Through the glass walls, I watched Tund and Marcus. I could not hear them, but I could read the conversation clearly. Tund spoke in short, controlled gestures. Marcus stood very still. At one point, he shook his head. Tund said something sharp. Marcus stopped. When they returned, Tund addressed Folake directly. "We owe this table and Ms. Nwosu a clear explanation," he said. "Mr. Voss signed a termination document based on a departmental recommendation that has since come under serious internal review. It was not consistent with Ms. Nwosu's performance record, and it should not have been processed without proper review. That was an error." He did not look at Marcus when he said it. Folake nodded. "And Mr. Boyle's role going forward?" A pause. "Mr. Boyle will be transitioning out of his position with immediate effect. That decision has already been made." Marcus made no sound. He did not look at me. He stared at a fixed point on the table and stayed very still. I kept my hands flat and looked straight ahead. It was over for him, and every single person in that room already knew it. The contract discussion that followed was direct and efficient. Folake's legal team had already prepared a revised version of the signing documents that morning, based on what Zara had shared with them the previous evening. The new version named me as the lead technical authority for the post-signing implementation phase, with direct engagement through Pinnacle rather than through Nova Bridge. It was not a punitive document. It did not drag anyone through formal accusations. It simply restructured the technical oversight to reflect who had actually built the system and who Pinnacle trusted to support it going forward. Tund reviewed the terms carefully. Bayo made 2 brief notes. Then Tund signed. Folake signed for Pinnacle. The deal closed at 11:14 in the morning. $47 million. When the final signature was in place, Folake stood up and reached across the table. "Welcome to the project officially," she said and shook my hand. I thanked her. I kept my expression composed and professional, the way I had kept it through the entire morning. But inside, something quiet and durable settled into place. Not triumph, something more solid. The specific, grounded feeling of knowing that you did the right work in the right way, and that when the record was finally read, it spoke completely for itself. Adrian Cole packed up his things across the table. He said nothing. Months later, I was still leading the Pinnacle implementation. The system performed exactly as designed. No corruption flags. No timeout errors. No problems in the night. Pinnacle's freight data moved through the API bridge cleanly, and their operations team had stopped bracing every time they opened their dashboard. Zara and I had a standing call every Tuesday. She had become, in the way real professional partnerships sometimes do, someone I genuinely trusted. Marcus was gone within a week of the signing. The announcement described it as a mutual decision. The people who knew the full story understood exactly what it was. Harlan Voss had a harder time. The Pinnacle situation exposed a broader pattern. Department heads making major personnel decisions without sufficient review. 3 other staff members came forward with similar accounts in the months that followed. Harlan stepped down before the year was out. I never returned to Nova Bridge as an employee. My engagement remained directly with Pinnacle, and I built from there, one honest deliverable at a time. There is a version of this story where I feel sorry for what happened to Marcus. I have looked for that version. I have not found it, but I do not spend much time thinking about the ending he received. What I return to, the part that still matters, is the moment I sat in that parking lot with everything stripped away and chose, quietly and deliberately, to build something better. That choice made everything else possible.